In his first letter to the early church, Peter implores the body of Christ to lead lives dedicated to holiness. He writes, "So prepare your minds for action and exercise self-control. Put all your hope in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world. So you must live as God's obedient children. Don't go back into your old ways of living to satisfy your own desires. You didn't know any better then. But now you must be holy in everything you do, just as God who chose you is holy. For the scriptures say, 'You must be holy because I am holy.'" Peter goes on to say in chapter 2, "So get rid of all evil behavior. Be done with all deceit, hypocrisy, jealousy, and all unkind speech. Like newborn babies, you must crave pure spiritual milk so that you will grow into a full experience of salvation. Cry out for this nourishment now that you have had a taste of the Lord's kindness." I don't know about you. All that sounds great. I certainly want that for myself, but it also seems like a daunting task, especially when you think about all that being holy entails. I'm pretty sure I've been deceitful, hypocritical, jealous, and spoken unkindly all in the same day on more than one occasion. How can we possibly pursue holiness on our own? And are we even supposed to?
Oh boy. So growing up I spent, I'd say, the first 2/3 of my life overweight. I tried many various fad diets, things that I read in muscle magazines and so on and so forth. Eventually, I came to a point where I realized the true underlying fundamental principles involved in weight loss and nutrition. And as I realized those and began to apply them to my life, I began to see results, which was new for me and very exciting. And so I kind of got caught up in that initial passion when you start to see progress. And so I guess that sort of led me from applying these principles to myself to being passionate about it and always wanting to tell everybody about it. And so friends and family naturally would be asking questions, and so then I wanted to apply those principles to them. And so one thing led to another, and I became first a certified personal trainer and then also a certified nutritionist. So when it comes to fitness, either physical fitness or spiritual fitness, I think you could sort of divide it up into two separate fundamental categories that are both required together to sort of equate to total fitness, if you will. So on the one hand, you have sort of resistance, which is the idea of providing resistance, to your muscles so that they undergo adaptation, so that they then grow new muscle. And then on the other hand, there's sort of the idea of nourishment. And so, you can provide that stimulus, that adaptation stimulus to your muscles, but if you don't have the proper nutrients, within your system to facilitate that growth, then you won't see any growth. You could go to the gym and work out all day and take yourself to the point of absolute exhaustion, and if you don't have the proper nutrients and the building blocks required to facilitate new tissue growth, then you won't see any kind of results. And so I think it's very similar in our spiritual journey, especially when you look at, for example, the trajectory of someone's long-term gym journey, if you want to say it like that, or someone's long-term sort of like physical fitness career. What's interesting is that when you start out, gains come a lot more easily, and then the further and further you go, the more volume typically is required. So for one thing, you yourself are capable of handling more weight, and so it requires more weight in order to continue to make progress. But also over the long-term journey, most people incrementally have to add more volume to their training routine as they go, so that when you look at it, actually the person who has made the most significant amount of gains over time is the person who has undergone the most significant amount of struggle and resistance. And so I think it's the same thing in our spiritual journey, which is that you can't you can't bear fruit if you haven't been put to the test, if you haven't been, put in those situations where you're forced to rely entirely on God. And similarly, in terms of nutrition, if you're not saturating yourself constantly with the word of life, then you don't have those fundamental building blocks that are required to support you when you're in that place where you're completely exhausted. You've trained your spiritual muscles, and you're at the point where you have reached the end of your capacity. And it's there that we need those promises of God. We need the knowledge of Him, and we need the His word that He gives us to the primary way by which we learn about Him. And without that underlying our spiritual journey, we don't stand a chance. One thing that I notice a lot of time as both a personal trainer and a nutritionist is that people have this sort of what I think is a skewed perception of motivation. It's easy to sort of fall into this mindset that as soon as you become a Christian and give your life to Christ, it's going to be smooth sailing, and it's all going to be downhill, and it's just a free bus ride, up to heaven. And the truth is that it's never promised that life is going to be easy. And in fact, there are so many places in the Bible where it talks of testing. People get tested, and Paul talks about endurance all the time. God tests Job, for example. Jesus himself was tested. And so we know that external motivation is an extremely fickle friend, and it's not always there, and you can't always rely on it. It's much like for example, emotion in our spiritual journey. We have a tendency to want to feel something. We want to feel on fire. And if we're not feeling, on fire for God every moment of our waking existence, we start to doubt, we start to worry, when in truth, emotions are not what we're relying on, it's not a good indicator of our salvation status for sure. And so in terms of motivation, I always encourage people, I try to guide them towards relying more on an internal motivation that comes from themselves rather than an external motivation that comes from, extenuating factors, from being motivated by a film that they watched or a music that they listened to or whatever it may be. What I do is I help people focus on their internal why. And so there's a lot of different ways that we do this. But basically, the idea is that they're digging deep, deep down within themselves to figure out why it is that they want to be fit in the first place. Because if they really do want to be fit in the first place, there's a reason for it. And if you can find that reason for it and then sort of remind them of it and draw the line for them between their why and what they're doing, that's going to be infinitely more powerful in terms of getting them up out of bed, getting them to go on that run, getting them in the gym consistently, than trying to rely on all these sort of external factors of motivation. Now, I think the same thing is true in our spiritual lives, and the nice thing is we already have our why. If we're believers in Jesus, we already have our why determined for us. It's very clear cut. We are to point to God's glory, we're to direct other people to Him, and we're to find our ultimate satisfaction in His glory. But another important aspect to motivation is sort of the social component of it. And so, whenever I'm sitting down with a prospective client, one of the questions that I'll ask them is, I'll try to get a feel for what their sort of social network looks like. Because there's a huge difference between somebody who has fitness goals that they want to achieve, and they also have, an entire immediate family who's also interested in the same thing, versus somebody who has goals that they want to achieve and they're with a significant other who, resents the fact that they're trying to lose weight, and that significant other perhaps, feels intimidated by it. And so that's going to present a real challenge that somebody who is with like-minded people surrounding them who also want that same goal, he's not going to face that challenge. And in fact, he's going to be helped and encouraged by having other people who are willing to join with him or her in that pursuit. And so similarly, in terms of the spiritual journey, it's heartbreaking sometimes when you see people who are well-meaning individuals who have given their lives to Christ, who are trying to grow spiritually, but they're missing out on the component of sort of community. And so this is why I think it's vital to not only go to church, but also to be in smaller community groups, for example, because you can't put a price on the value of surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, who are reaching towards the same goals that you are, who can encourage you and spur you on. And you know, on the one hand, yes, the personal trainer or the pastor, for example, has a role in accountability and in helping you in the social aspect, but just doing it with other people who are your peers, who are, you know, going through the exact same struggles that you are, who you can make personal connections with on a daily or weekly basis, and who you can sort of like figure those struggles out together with is absolutely huge.
Clearly, I still need to get some more work in, but that doesn't mean I need to be too hard on myself. Just because I still have fitness goals to reach doesn't mean I'm not fit. Unfortunately, when it comes to spiritual growth, we don't always view it that way. We sometimes believe the lie that we have to work harder and grow more to earn our salvation. That is just not true. The Greek word for holy is hagios, meaning pure and cherished. Furthermore, holiness is hagiosmos, meaning sanctified and consecrated. If you have ever felt like you had to just do a little more to earn your salvation and earn God's approval, hear this. From the moment you declared Jesus as Lord and asked forgiveness of your sins, God made you pure and sanctified. He consecrated you for great things, and He cherishes you as His child. You were made a saint, a sinner no more. And yet, none of us are perfect. We still make mistakes and are in need of some refinement. Paul wrote about this continual sanctification in Philippians when he said that believers should continue to work out their faith. I really like the way the New Living Translation puts it. It says, "Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him." So how do we continue to work out our salvation? Fortunately for us, God created the best gym ever for exercising our holiness. It's the local church. Within the context of the church, we find our biggest fans and best accountability partners. After all, we are all saints on the journey of holiness. Let's pursue it together.